Hello everybody, and thank you for joining me for this webinar, which is going to take you through the Queer Student Awards, which I'm very excited to be sharing with everybody today. This is something that I have had in my head for at least 2 years. It's something that I wanted to launch last year as a full in-person live event, and then Corona hit and I had to change my plan. And I was wanting to then launch it this year, and we're still in lockdown. So I've decided to go ahead anyway, and I'm going to tell you in today's webinar all about why, how you can get involved, and why it's so important to me and to the LGBTQ plus community. A few bits of guidance before we go in, rules and stuff. So it's just me running this webinar today. If you would like to flag any tech concerns or anything, pop them in the chat box. I'll keep my eye on that. Any questions, if you could leave those to the end, that'd be great. Pop them in the Q&A box here as well, and we'll address those towards the end too. So without further ado, let's get going. So today on the webinar, what I'm going to do is talk about my queer story, introduce myself. Some of you might not know who I am. So my name's Steve Keith and I'm the founder of The Branding Man. More detail on that in a second. I'm going to tell you about why celebrating queer talent matters today. I'm also going to tell you about when and where the awards themselves are going to happen. I'm going to tell you about how you can enter those awards, and I'm also going to tell you about how you can support them, because I need some support for this to get it off the ground, and I'd love for you to be involved with that. And I'm also, before we wrap up as well, going to tell you what you might be able to expect beyond the awards and why. So, my queer story. So, as I said, my name's Steve Keith. I'm the founder of The Branding Man. It's an employer brand agency that I set up around 3 years ago after spending the majority of my career up until that point working in employer branding with professional services EY, formerly known as Ernst & Young, working on their apprenticeship and recruitment marketing campaigns for all of the apprenticeship opportunities they had across the UK. Prior to that, I was a teacher on the Teach First programme, a geography teacher in East London. I spent 2 years teaching 11 through to 18-year-olds before moving on to working in the recruitment team there, and then the learning and development team, which took me to 2010, which is where I joined EY. My queer story, and I thought this was important to share because there is a personal reason why I've decided to launch these awards as well. And as the founder of them, I think it's important that you hear that story and you appreciate where I'm coming from. So my coming out experience, very much like everybody else's, identifies with the queer community, and I will be interchangeably using the words queer and LGBTQ plus today, depending on what the research that I'm sharing has said and the focus of the topic at that point. Coming out for me, it's one of those things, and I had a guest on my podcast that I'm going to mention in a second last year, Chloe Davies from My G Work, and she talked about how she was no longer going to edit herself for people. And that resonated really strongly with me. My coming out experience, I'm living back at home in the Lake District at the moment, thanks to all Rona. This is the house where I came out to my parents 11, 12 years ago. It's also the house where I grew up. It's also in the village that I grew up in, surrounded by some of the people that I grew up with still. And I had to edit myself when I was growing up. I was bullied for being different when I was at school. I used to spend a lot of time playing with the girls at school. I'd go and play with their Barbies, their Sylvanian families, take my Lego along at the same time. It's something when, in terms of coming out for individuals that identify with the queer community, that's different for everybody. And even today, whenever I meet somebody new, I'm thinking in my head whether or not they know I'm gay, whether or not I should tell them I'm gay. So it's pretty much every time you meet somebody new, you have to make a judgment as to whether or not you share that information about yourself. And so that's a really important part of my story, but also the reasons why I wanted to be able to launch these awards this year. As I said, I was bullied for being different when I was at school. But during my time in London, I've also been physically attacked because of my sexuality. I've shared that on LinkedIn for National Coming Out Day. I think it was back in October last year, so you can have a look at that if you're interested. A very painful, literally, experience, but also mentally as well. And and I don't really talk about this very frequently. It's not really something that I have been ready to share openly in too much detail with people, but I'm also the survivor of emotional abuse from another member of the LGBTQ plus community. So this is something that happens within and outside. So it's a very important part of the reason why I'm launching these awards. It wasn't until I joined EY back in 2010 that I really appreciated the importance of having a strong sense of belonging and being able to demonstrate my value add in an organisation would have on my confidence and the then trajectory of my career. It wasn't really until I joined that organisation that I started to flourish. I started to become more open about myself. I started to share more. I started to build my network and got myself to the place that I'm at today. So it's an incredibly important part of my story. As a result, it will probably not surprise you that I'm wholeheartedly believe in equality and representation in student recruitment. A big part of the reason why I've launched the Queer Student Awards is that I don't think we're doing enough for this community. We're often blinkered and looking and focusing on other diversity characteristics, which isn't for me to say that that shouldn't be happening, but that if we are, I do challenge it by saying that if we are going to identify characteristics and actively recruit or speak to those audiences, then we need to make an effort. And I don't think we're making enough effort when it comes to LGBTQ plus members of the student audience. I'm a role model. I don't know if that's a bit arrogant to put myself out there and put that label on myself, but I volunteer as a role model with the inclusion charity, LGBTQ plus, inclusion charity, Diversity Role Models, going into schools, talking about my coming out experience like I am with you today, but also virtually. As we've had to over the last year. And it's one of the reasons I believe in the work that they're doing so much that I've chosen them as the charity partner for the Queer Student Awards. More on that to come. And I host my own podcast. I've been doing that for the last 2 years. I'm a very nosy person, and I use the time on my podcast, so I'm laughing at my own joke there, to be nosy and to talk with my guests about their career and share their stories. And because of everything going on in the world today, because of my advocacy for the queer LGBTQ plus community, I've decided that this new season that's currently out at the moment, the 4th season, so we're up to over 70 guests now, is focusing purely on the stories of those who identify as being LGBTQ plus. So lots to look forward to there, with a few episodes already out. So why is it important to celebrate queer talent? So if we look back 52 years now, so in 2019 it was the 50th anniversary of the Stonewall riots, where a very important person, the trans black woman in the top left hand picture in your screen there, Marsha P. Johnson, incited the start of the Stonewall riots in New York. It was something that was probably, in terms of visual impact and kind of shaking up of a community, similar to, I'm not going to dare to compare it directly to Black Lives Matter, but in that respect, it was a community that was shouting up and saying, we've had enough. Things need to change. And whilst the community has moved on a lot since those riots, and since the time before that, I've just finished reading a fab book called The Glamour Boys, given to me by one of my allies, Harriet, which goes through the story of some MPs that were identified as being homosexual within Winston Churchill's government, who flagged very early on, before the Second World War, that things were going to happen, and were actively silenced and discriminated against because of their sexuality. Great read, so go and have a check it out. What I'm trying to say is that this story arc within the LGBTQ plus community is very much one which is shrouded around progress and talks about celebrating as well. The riots themselves back 52 years ago have directly informed Pride. So the Pride events that we see on the streets, or we used to see on the streets before COVID hit, are a direct ancestry from those riots. Obviously, they didn't happen last year. Some of them have been put back into the calendar this year. Manchester, Birmingham, London, Brighton, I've heard about, at the end of August and into September. But that now means also that the festivals and celebrations that would have happened in June for Pride and July aren't going to be there. The community as a whole, when we're looking at the LGBTQ plus community, there's lots that goes on when we've been in lockdown. So there's been an increase supposedly of domestic and emotional abuse. As I said, I'm a survivor from that piece, so I can speak to that and know how hard that is to get out of that situation. But also as well, that we need these spaces, these celebrations, these gay bars, for us to be able to connect with and find love, find our family, find community, our second families in many cases, or even our first families for some people when their families have disowned them. So what I would hope with the inaugural year of the Queer Student Awards is that employers like yourself, suppliers, any educational institutions that are watching will see this as an opportunity to support in a space and a time when it's needed the most. Now, I'm painting a darkish picture there, I guess, but it's an important picture to paint. But there is lots to talk about and lots to celebrate. Just these examples coming from the Gay Times Instagram show that actually there's a lot of denial of LGBT people and actually existing, about intolerance towards certain members of the community, particularly around transgender. Conversion therapy still being very much something that is present, where we as a community are told that our feelings and the way that we choose to love aren't correct, aren't right, and need to be flushed out. Bold steps in terms of pronouns that are happening. You'll notice from my Zoom and from my social media that I use he, him for my pronouns, and it's a sign of respect for everybody within the community and something that takes 2 minutes to do and that I would advise a lot of people to embrace. There's pieces here on the screen about how some of the, as of going back to that piece around Glamour Boys in the Second World War, that there's been LGBTQ plus soldiers that are only just having their medals given back to them that were taken away. So people that fought for our country had something, an achievement, a recognition of their work taken from them just because of who they choose to love. No, not for me. Positive stories out there. So there's lots of footballers in Germany that have chosen to pledge to support their fellow LGBTQ plus footballers. Yesterday was the UK announced in London the first ever retirement home opening this year. I've booked my place for the future. Yes, for the future, for some of you that are on here now and that I know that will probably make a joke of that on WhatsApp afterwards. Some campaigns come out of our community that are rooted in sadness. So sadly, the shooting that happened at the Pulse nightclub in Miami is something that has led to the creation of the One Pulse Foundation and support from Ricky Martin, one of my heartthrobs from when I was a teenager, who has come out since and is in a loving relationship and has children. All of these kind of great advocates for family that are starting to emerge with there as well. And obviously, it started this year, the removal of Trump from office and Biden stepping in and very quickly starting to get rid of a lot of the discriminatory laws that have been put in place there, including those attributed to LGBTQ plus and putting people within the White House that identify as being part of our fabulous community. And then one of the great success stories of the last few weeks, which tied in quite nicely with LGBT History Month, has been the fab Russell T Davies series, It's a Sin. Watch it. Everybody should watch it. Tackles the AIDS epidemic in the 80s and 90s. It's a tearjerker, particularly episodes 3 and 5, so just be aware of that. But it has had a huge amount of attention. It has led to some really positive conversations about stigma with HIV, and has actually led to increased HIV testing using home kits that back in the day then weren't even something that existed, let alone treatment that is available, which can ensure that somebody who has tested positive for HIV can continue to live their life perhaps as definitely as long as somebody who doesn't have the virus, and also stop them from passing it on to their sexual partners. So great positive stories out there amongst all of the things that we're still fighting for. And that's why we have the Pride celebrations, and that is another reason why I've decided to found the awards. But what does being queer mean in 2021? So I'm using some terms, LGBTQ plus, queer, sometimes not using the plus, depending on the things that I'm talking about. There's lots of confusion around our own identity sometimes within the community, and queer is a way in which it's being our community, I suppose, especially young people, are starting to find themselves. Research done by Ditch the Label in 2017 showed that over half of 13 to 26-year-olds in the UK and the US do not identify with being straight. So they consider themselves to fall somewhere else on the, in terms of sexuality. They might be bisexual, asexual, they might be pansexual, they might be gay, they might be lesbian, they might be transgender. All of these different letters that go on that plus afterwards, beyond the Q for queer, are questioning in some circumstances as well, showing that the word is being reclaimed. Now, it is a word which in the past has been used discriminatory, and used as a slur and thrown at people and used to incite hate. So I do appreciate that there may be people watching this that identify with our community that might be thinking that is a dangerous word to be throwing around, Stephen, to be throwing onto the title of an awards ceremony, but it is a word that resonates with the audience that the awards that will help you see aims to celebrate, and something that is openly discussed and should be openly discussed. I've learned a lot about it myself from this great book here. It's World Book Day, so I should take the opportunity to share something. It's from Meg John Barker and Jules Shield, Queer, A Graphic History. Fantastic book here. I might say it's a picture book, but it's good to read, especially in bed at night when you don't really want to be reading huge amounts of text. But it's explaining everything that's going on with queer identity, and the queer community draws upon a kaleidoscope of characters, lots of diverse worlds of pop culture, from film, activists, and academia as well. And one of the reasons I wanted to use it as a way to identify these awards, rather than using LGBTQ plus, for example, was that for me, it's very much a term which has inclusion at the heart of the stories told that I'm really confident that the awards will bring out. Queer culture itself explores how, as a result, we came to view sex, gender, sexuality in the ways that we do, and how culture can shift our perspective, of what's normal. And so by using the term, what I'm hoping is that we will embrace the way that young people identify with themselves and each other, because as employers, recruiting young people, and suppliers, helping employers, and educational institutions, teaching our young people, that's what we should be doing. We should be embracing the way young people identify, not how we think they should be identifying, and start to see things more queerly. So when we look at queer talent and early careers, kind of how does it link into the work that many of you watching might already be doing? For me, as I've said before, I think the LGBTQ plus community is underrepresented in many diversity and inclusion talent acquisition strategies. That could be quite bold to say that, and some people might disagree. I do, as I've already said, feel like when it comes to diversity and inclusion, we do focus quite heavily on the diversity characteristics we can see that are visible, rather than the ones that are undisclosed and we don't know about. If I'm brutally honest, and I will be, let's go for it, why not? you're leaving a group out, essentially. You're talking about being diverse and being inclusive, but you're not speaking to certain groups because in some respects you don't want to make the effort to go and find out about those groups. It's uncomfortable. It leads to prioritization within recruitment, and that makes me feel conflicted because I love the work that many young employers are doing within early careers, but a lot of the work I question. And that is why I've decided to found the awards. Largely, I look at employer branding. It's what I do. It's my bread and butter. And I've drawn upon some research that Gay Times released last year. Tag Warner was talking about this at YMS Online last week, and 82% from that research of young people feel that LGBTQ plus representation by brands is tokenistic. Now, this was quite consumer-led research, but I am very confident when I talk about employer brand that employer brands can learn a lot from consumer brands and vice versa. So I am taking this stat and running with it. Tokenism within the LGBTQ plus community for me revolves and always has revolved quite heavily around the use of our rainbow flag, or the progress flag. Pride Progress flag as it's known now, with the addition of the trans and diversity colours. So the baby blue, baby pink, white for trans, and the black and the brown for diversity, to speak to our people of colour that sit within the LGBTQ plus community. A lot of organisations, again, I'll be honest, slap a rainbow on their logo during Pride season or LGBT History Month if they bother to focus on that. And think that that's enough. It's not. It really is not enough. What I want to get to with the Queer Student Awards is a place where we can be proud of the work that we do, and students look up at that work and think, I can work there. I will feel welcome. This company knows me and understands me and my community. And you don't get that with tokenism. They also said that 32% of brands, only 32% of brands engage with them outside of Pride, despite the vast majority, 84% of them saying that they wanted to see more. So those three stats alone for me are no-brainers in terms of people wanting to get involved with the Queer Student Awards, and the reason why I set this up, because the stats alone there speak for themselves. Young people know when brands aren't being kind of putting in the effort. They want to see more effort, and they want to see it all year round. And yes, I'm talking about an awards ceremony that's going to happen in the summer or during Pride season, but as you'll see towards the end of the presentation, I've got a vision for this of how it's going to become an evergreen piece of work where we can really start to tackle queer communities and help them. When we look at the piece around intersectionality, which I think is really important when we're talking about early careers and diversity and inclusion in talent acquisition, some stats that jumped out to me. So a lot of, again, undisclosed characteristics can meet and compound with each other and then be overlaid with social factors about how somebody grew up, what they're experiencing at the moment. So 29% of LGBTQ of NEETs that identified also as being LGBTQ plus had a disability. So NEETs, for those that are watching that aren't familiar with that terminology, is not in employment, education and training. So the marginalised communities, the people that are most vulnerable and at risk, the people that are probably on universal credit right now, the people that need help and need access into the workplace. There's a sizable chunk of those people that identify with a variety of different diversity characteristics that need support, and are going to need specialised, personalised support. They're not just going to be wanted to be targeted because they are a certain colour or a certain gender, or of their sexuality, or because they've got a disability. There's lots of different things that mix and match together. With everything that's going on at the moment as well, it's having a negative impact on our health. It's leading to job dissatisfaction. This is from research from the CIPD that was released recently. A lot of people are feeling less safe when it comes to psychological safety. That's really important. I spent 2 years teaching in a classroom where I went back in the closet because I was too worried to be myself. I've been in social situations, particularly the incident where I was attacked, where I was being targeted and didn't feel safe in the city that I'd lived in for a sizable amount of time at that point, because somebody didn't think that I should exist and wanted to tackle that. We need to do more. That psychological safety piece and the focus that we need to be putting and thinking and mindful of for LGBT plus is important. And research released by Just Like Us, another educational charity, just a few weeks ago showed that young people think that there, or believe that there is little to zero positive messaging when it comes to the queer community. Little to zero. That needs attention. Numerous reports have been published in the last 3 years as well, which highlight that young people who identify as LGBTQ plus and need more support to help them navigate career options to find work in the UK. The stats again and the data behind them stack it up. So PwC and Out Leadership's survey from a few years ago showed that in terms of employer attractiveness, so I focus on employer brands, so I'm going to speak about this obviously, but career progression, friendliness towards LGBTQ plus people, and visibility of leaders that also identify as being is incredibly important and tops the list. It's 100% for career progression and 95% when it comes to friendliness. So there's a huge important piece of work that the Queer Student Awards will work to address in terms of celebrating people within organisations to open that door, drop that ladder down for those behind them that might be worried, might be scared to come out to be able to join an organisation. Stonewall's research has also shown that 42% of students when they're at university have hidden their identity. I wasn't out at university. I was certainly experimenting with my sexuality, but not many people knew. I didn't think they knew. When I told a few people, they'd either seen me or they knew and they were just waiting for me to tell. And that's a big part of my own career story as well, is that when I have told people, they've known, but they've been respectful enough to wait for me to be ready to share that. And I'm always grateful for that. But hiding your identity, let me pose it like this. If you identify as being heterosexual and you're watching this webinar today, and you think back at any point in your life, but particularly when you were maybe at university or working as an apprentice, perhaps, that if you felt that you had to hide your identity every single day, how would that make you feel? That's what the Queer Student Awards is about. It's about tackling that and making more people feel like they can come forward. Yes, there's a part with this, and I'll address it. I've had a conversation with the CEO, Adam, over at Diversity Role Models, that's talked about this, that there may be people that would be great students to be recognised for the work that they're doing, that could come forward and be celebrated for these awards, but they might not be out. They might not be ready to be out. This might not be the opportunity for them to be out, for us to thrust them into the spotlight. I do want to make sure that when people are putting themselves forward or nominating others for these awards, that there is an option for people to keep their identity anonymous, so that I can reach out to them, the judging panel can reach out to them post after the awards, and just recognise the fact that we've seen them and that we celebrate them, because that's an important piece as much as anything else. Also as well, coming back to the not in education, employment and training piece, many of these young people are unsure how to access the workplace and might not join through one of the programs that employers are offering. So it's important that from a widening participation point of view and social mobility, we're recognising that too. Just Like Us research also shows that during lockdown and the pandemic to date, that LGBTQ plus young people are twice as likely as their heterosexual peers to feel lonely and be worrying. When you look at breaking that down into diversity in terms of people of colour, Black, young, LGBTQ plus people are at risk of being the most lonely and the most anxious, more than their white peers. So again, coming back to intersectionality and the importance of focusing on the person and what they're looking for and their story and their experience, the awards hopefully will open a door for us to be able to celebrate that. When we look at also as well what the world is going to look like once those doors fly open and we're allowed to go out again. A lot of the skills that the PwC report highlighted as well, for example, around LGBTQ plus people being more inclusive, having more empathy, being more authentic, being resilient, being adaptable. I look at that list and I go, yeah, I probably am. But it's come from a place of pain. It's come from a struggle. It's come from not knowing who I was. It's come from having to fight every single day. And we shouldn't underappreciate that. We shouldn't look at those skills and go, oh, great, those are the skills that we need. So we'll start targeting these people. What I'm hoping to do by highlighting that is that actually when we're looking at workforce planning and we're looking at what's needed for the future, a lot of these skills are leadership skills. And so that role model and leadership piece is really important and something that will be recognised as well within the awards. Finally, just to wrap up as well in terms of the why for this, as I said, I was bullied at school. I had a drama teacher that told me that my performance of Nicholas Necrophiliac in Dracula Spectacular was sensationally camp. At the time, I didn't know what that word meant, so I went home and looked it up in the dictionary. And that was part of me, discovery of my sexuality from that as well, really. But homophobic, biphobic, and transphobic, otherwise known as HBT bullying in schools, is a very real issue still. It's one of the reasons why I got involved with diversity role models. Now, if you're not familiar with diversity role models and their work, they're an inclusion charity focused on LGBTQ+. And they create safe spaces where young people can explore difference and consider their role in creating a world where we all feel accepted. And one of the workshops that I get involved with involves sharing my story. It involves young people having to work out kind of who is who based on things that we share about our own story to challenge stereotypes. But it opens up conversations. I've had some fantastic conversations. I visited a school in Marylebone just before lockdown happened, where I spoke to a group of sixth formers. And it was the sixth formers who identified as being heterosexual that asked some of the most intelligent and thoughtful questions that showed that they were interested in learning more and being able to be empathetic and to support. That really impressed me there as well. So I'm a huge advocate for diversity role model work. I've as I said, I volunteer with them. I've run, don't think I've run for a long time looking down at my stomach here, but my COVID belly. But I've taken part in what was I saying? I've taken part in a half marathon for them, Roll Parks as well. But I wanted to be able to give back to them as well, because charities are suffering at the moment. Diversity role models are doing okay, but they would love more support. So in terms of the sponsorship packages that'll be available for people to get involved with this, diversity role models is intertwined into that. A portion of the money made from the employer entries into the awards will be given back to diversity role models as well, and there'll also be a raffle. But to wrap up, their latest piece of research last year showed that 54% of young people in secondary schools say that HBT bullying is common. 27%, only 27% say that they feel safe to come out. So that's 73% who don't. And 32% of year 11s, so just before they're going off to sixth form, have seen bullying in school. So they're not just saying they think it's common, they've actually seen it happen. These are sad statistics and it needs to be tackled earlier on in schools. There's a lot of work that employers are doing in schools. There's a lot of noise around D&I. There's a huge opportunity to work with diversity role models and to take the information that's come out of this research that's quite shocking, to be honest, and upsetting for me, having been somebody that was bullied at school, being a teacher and not stepped up or not felt comfortable enough at that point to stand up and come out and be a gay role model in front of students when I was teaching them. That things have changed, but they haven't changed that much. The Queer Student Awards aims to help in that mission. So When and where are the Queer Student Awards going to happen? So timelines wise, 25th of March, so in 3 weeks time, we'll be opening up nominations. About 2 months later, I think it's roughly 7.5 weeks, on the 14th of May, the nominations will close. That will give us an opportunity, the judging panel. I've got some fantastic judges that have already said yes. A few of you are on the webinar today. Hello. I hope you're ready for judging. Give them time to judge our entries before we run a virtual event in the week commencing the 7th of June, which would have been the start of Pride Month. It still is Pride Month, but again, let's work to do something positive in this gap that's been left by these Pride events that can't happen. So we'll have a panel event with some young people on there talking about their experiences of being LGBTQ, queer, and announce the shortlist as well, which will then give us a few weeks runway into the actual event itself. So the event is going to take place virtually. I would love for it to be in person. It could be based on the roadmap that we're working towards. There's so much risk and uncertainty going on right now that it wouldn't be wise of me to invest any sponsorship that's given towards the events and time and energy for then something to have to change at the last minute because of changes to that roadmap potentially. So we're going for a virtual event for this year. Next year we'll go guns blazing, a fabulous event in a venue somewhere with lots of dancing, lots of partying, lots of glitter. I might even dress up in drag. I might dress up in drag for the awards, you never know. On the 1st of July, supported by the wonderful work of Lorna Reeves at My Own My Events. She's also another volunteer that I met through Diversity Role Models. She runs her own business doing virtual events. She runs about 60 a month at the moment, so she's squeezed me in for this. Lorna will be delivering the live virtual celebration of the awards, and the awards will recognise queer individuals that are aged 16 to 24 and tackle attitudes towards the queer community, as I've already been explaining. It'll also celebrate queer talent in early careers and those that want to support them with their first experiences and their transition into the workplace. And it's going to be judged, as I said, by a panel of industry experts and students as well. It'll be hosted with an influential leader from the community, and there'll be entertainment provided by an LGBTQ plus queer artist. We'll also have a raffle courtesy of some queer-owned brands that I'm speaking to at the moment, and there will be a Spotify and Apple Music playlist which will be published close to the time. Anybody that enters into the awards will be asked a question of what is your queer anthem, and we'll add those songs into that list. So who can enter? So the award categories. So employers can enter. Employers can enter entries for Apprentice of the Year, Intern of the Year, Graduate of the Year, LGBTQ plus Employee Network of the Year, and Employer Brand Campaign of the Year. Students are going to be able to enter for School Leaver of the Year, either to nominate themselves or a friend. Role Model of the Year, so this is a great one, and we're talking again with Adam at DRM about this, and so this could allow a student to nominate their teacher, their careers advisor, their parent, their queer sibling. An apprentice or a graduate could be their line manager, the leader of their network, the CEO, somebody who has been integral and shows them what's possible. There's the Jill of the Year award. So if you've watched It's a Sin, I know I've mentioned it already, there is a character in there called Jill. She's an ally for the gay men in the show. This will be, I've used Jill of the Year just because of the show, but this will be there'll be no gender restrictions for this. So it's just somebody that is an ally for you that will be able to be nominated. Activist of the Year. Largely online, there's so many great young people that I see that are trying to advance our community and challenge the way that people think about and the perceptions that are built around the queer community, that I wanted students to be able to nominate those people and for us to recognise them. And also as well, there are going to be young people that have chosen not to go down a traditional path and start their own business. So there's a Young Entrepreneur of the Year category too. Schools, colleges and universities will also be able to enter for the school or college of the year, and also for University Society of the Year. We've already started, I've already started reaching out to loads of schools and loads of university societies, sharing the awards with them. The reception's been really, really positive, which is very exciting. Some people have already tried to submit without knowing what the categories are and what we're looking for, which is great. But I'll be going back to them and saying, here you go. And so there's those to throw in the mix as well. And then our judges, again, if you're watching, you will be able to then select from the 4 of the categories to pick a queer student of the year, so our Grand Prix of the evening. As I mentioned, our nominations will open on the 25th of March, and 25% of proceeds donated will go to role models in terms of the award, paid entries from employers. So how can you support? So before I go into kind of just briefly some of the details, because there will be a media pack that will be sent out to everybody that registered to attend today. In terms of supporting the QSA for me, if somebody said why, I would say to increase brand awareness and recognition amongst the LGBTQ plus or queer student and early careers population, to increase that brand association with student communities across schools, colleges, and universities in a way which supports them and celebrates difference at a time when they need it the most. To engage with young people who identify as LGBTQ plus queer, encourage applications to your vacancies through the sponsorship opportunities, and also to make a meaningful and visible statement of commitment and support towards the LGBTQ plus queer student community nationally. So how can you get involved? So there are opportunities for headline sponsors. Headline sponsors will, it's going to be up to 4 founding sponsors from different employer industry sectors, suppliers or educational institutions. There'll be access to exclusive pre and post event digital communications, opportunities for brand visibility and to speak during the live event, and corporate sponsorship included for some in-school diversity role model workshops. From category perspective, so there'll be individual packages open to all employers, suppliers and educational institutions, basic pre and post event digital communications, brand visibility during that category award, and again, sponsorship of the in-school diversity role models workshops. So as I said, there'll be a media pack that comes with the recording of this, and as a thank you for joining today by the end of tomorrow, and you can find out what the costs are, what the responsibilities and everything are within those media packs to follow. So quickly, as I said, I would talk about the future, because this isn't a flash in the pan. This isn't just about slapping a rainbow on during June, during July and Pride celebrations. It's about working together. I'm going to be looking to strike up brand collaborations with organisations. There will be a celebration in person later on in the year. We're looking at November at the moment to launch the 2022 event. I will bring timescales forward a little bit because we'll have a bit more space to do that next year. So we'll launch during LGBT plus History Month and then have the celebration in the summer as well. There'll be monthly panel events that I'll be looking to bring in. An idea I've got for this, so think of International Women's Day, which is happening on Monday. Wouldn't it be great to have a queer International Women's panel that featured lesbians, featured women that identified as being bisexual, transgender women, and talk about the issues that they're facing, the barriers that they face in the workplace. See if they're the same, see if they're different, how can we be supporting? That's the vision I've got for things coming out of the Queer Student Awards. And also for conferences too. How are we going to start conversations and keep them going? Share best practice and ensure that in years to come, as many young people as possible who are comfortable in sharing who they are, can do, and can thrive in the workplace. Thank you so much for your time today. I am going to stay online for a few minutes to take any questions that anybody might have. Please do get in touch if you'd like to know more, but as I said, I will be following up with people. If you're watching the recording here, this piece of information could be particularly useful for you. Email at info@thequeerstudentawards.co.uk, website thequeerstudentawards.co.uk, and connect on social media. got an Instagram channel that's growing at the moment at the Queer Student Awards, and we've also got a LinkedIn page set up. Again, I'll be sending links to those in the email you will be receiving by the end of the week. Thank you for your time. I've been Steve, I'm queer, and I am here.